The information provided on this podcast is intended to be educational and informational only and is not considered to be formal legal advice. The listener should not take or refrain from taking action based on its content. Any listener in need of legal opinion upon which to rely in decision-making should consider formally engaging an attorney to review relevant facts in detail and examine the pertinent law as it applies to those facts.
Welcome to Real Estate Milestones, where we explore fascinating topics in commercial real estate with knowledgeable industry experts. I'm your host, Ben Malik, and I'm a young real estate professional who is passionate about adding value to people's lives through the incredible power of real estate. My goal is to help you discover what the heck is going on in the industry and how you can get involved. This is Real Estate Milestones, where your future in real estate lies just around the corner. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Real Estate Milestones. Today we have Brad Cartier, who does a ton of things all across real estate. So we're in for a jam-packed episode with a ton of awesome content. Brad's a real estate developer, writer, prop tech investor, and advisor, and marketing consultant in the real estate technology space. So Brad, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and all those amazing things you got going on?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Ben. I own my own development company here in Ottawa, Canada. I write about all things real estate for a number of different outlets, including my own newsletter called Briefcase. Really just enjoy this space and sort of the intersection of technology and new business models and towards real estate and sort of, disrupting this legacy industry that's been around forever and has created all this wealth. But we're sort of at this inflection point now with all the technology coming out and, different lifestyles and different demographics. And I mean, the pandemic itself just sort of flipped everything on its head. So just really, really happy to be a part of the industry and have my fingers in a number of different opportunities.
Awesome. Yeah, I forgot to mention Brad's our first guest coming from Canada. So that's pretty awesome. Definitely offer some new cool perspectives. And Briefcase is the newsletter we've heard about, and it's pretty awesome. I've definitely heard about some pretty cool trends, which I'm excited to jump into today. So before we get started with these awesome trends, what's your first milestone in real estate?
I think my first milestone was the first rental property I bought with a business partner of mine. It was a terrace home kind of condo type thing, bought about 15 years ago. Ended up being a terrible investment, but you know what? We learned so much from that initial investment that I wouldn't change it for the world. It's sort of like the education, the tuition that we paid. And we ended up making money on it long term, but not until the last couple of years, because as you know, the real estate market's been on fire for 2 years. So we made money on it, but not out of anything we did specifically. It was just sort of dumb luck because the market was so hot, and we got rid of that property last year. But that was really an eye opener for me.
Yeah, awesome. And that's my trepidation now is if I want to learn trial by fire, the market might not save me anymore. So I'm definitely trying to make sure I do it the right way when I get started with my first deal. And I'm gonna make sure to protect capital, and that's the main prerogative. In addition to all the good learning.
Yeah, ironically enough, Ben, I think the next 5 years are actually going to be good for real estate investors. It's going to be better than the last couple of years where you're overpaying and overbidding and basically free money that enables some rash decisions. So I'm happy to get into that, but I think it's going to be better for folks like us who are trying to scoop up rental properties.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. And I think as interest rates rise, there might be a little bit of a cap rate compression, or the values of the properties might start coming down a little bit. And maybe I'll have to pay a higher interest rate, but with it's I always want a lower purchase price, because when the interest rates go back down later, you can refinance, but you can't redo your purchase price. So definitely cool. And could you tell, I guess let's get into that. So what are you thinking in terms of I guess the 5-year picture in terms of where you think the market's going?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to make definitive calls, but I mean, we can sit here and we can read the tea leaves. I mean, demand. So going back to the credit crisis of 2008, and people very often mistake that with they call it the housing crisis. And let's be clear, it was because of very poor lending standards and real estate. The crash in real estate was just a symptom of that underlying credit credit issue. But we had an artificial demand back then. That's not something we have now. Unlike the early 2000s, demand was propped up by these terrible banking practices. Demand for housing now is through the roof, and in fact, supply can't even keep up with that. So there's about 5 million. There's a shortage of 5 million homes in the U.S. Canada has a similar shortage that's proportional to our smaller population. But just the laws of supply and demand tell us that we aren't going to see that a massive crash that some people are actually calling for. And even if you look at the credit, the credit scores of borrowers today versus back then, they're actually quite higher. So the credit and the financial stability of borrowers these days is a lot better than back during the Great Recession. So I think there's with interest rates rising, supply has been there's been a lot of downward pressure on supply, not only because of bureaucracy, and we can get into zoning later, Ben, but the pandemic was here and supply chains are strained and the labor market strained. So that's, the lagging effect of that is that over the next, 2 to 5 years, we're going to see, supply struggle to keep up with, ongoing demand.
Yeah, that's a good perspective and covers a lot for sure. Kind of building on that, how is, we talked a little bit about lending. How is the lending environment in Canada different than America? Because I know that's a perspective that maybe only you could offer so far of all our guests. And I know that when people in America think of a mortgage or a loan, it's the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. I know that's a privilege that not everyone in America, not everyone in the rest of the world besides the US has. I know it has a lot to do with the Fannie and Freddie, but can you kind of say or tell us what is different about how Canada does it and what the implications of that are?
Yeah, I think, I'm not a broker or anything like that, but the big one is sort of the mortgage products that are offered to American clients from American banks seem to be a lot more favorable, just in terms of the actual terms of the loan. Like up in Canada, you can lock in a rate for 10 years, but it's, it gets to be quite high. The typical interest rate is locked in for 5 years up here versus you guys, you get the 30 years of interest rate lock-in in some of the products. So definitely a lot more favorable. So we're more vulnerable to the volatility in the interest rates up here versus down in the US. But we also have some government-backed insurers as well, similar to you folks. We have what's called CMHC, which is they insure certain types of mortgages here. So banks are more likely to lend out more money. And some of the terms of those are quite reasonable and good for developers like myself who want to build quality products. They will insure at record low rates, and they will extend amortizations out to 40, sometimes even 50 years. So we do have other benefits that aren't necessarily the reality in the US, but yeah, the big one is that 30-year rate lock. And I wish I could get my hands on some of that, especially the last two to three, so the last decade with pretty much negative interest rates. So that's no longer going to be the case. So we're in definitely a different environment now.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, so there's a theme that you touch on sometimes in your newsletter of the missing middle. I know that's a big focus of your development arm of your business. And I kind of wanted to hear what does that mean to you, and how are you positioning yourself in the environment to, illuminate us on that.
Yes. So I'll start with the first part of the question for those who aren't familiar with the term missing middle. It describes post-World War II, but it's the pre-World War II types of housing that was, prominent in North America. That includes, things like duplexes and triplexes, row homes, courtyard apartments, small, low-rise multifamily. That was quite prominent pre-World War II. It's something that's been prominent in Europe for centuries. They've been doing it right for a long time, but for a number of different reasons that I can talk about. But post-World War II, with the expansion of the suburbs and the rise of the automobile, and these big interstate highways that encourage that urban sprawl dramatically. Canada is no exception to that either. We did the same thing. And the knock-on effect of that is that these missing middle units not disappeared, but we were no longer building them. And they are critical to our current housing crisis and helping solve it, because they provide that light densification that we need to increase housing supply. It's something that I've had on my radar for about a decade now, that we've been investing in and building in, and I think over the next decade, it's going to be just as popular to build out, renovate, and create these types of multifamily commercial units.
Awesome. And so how's your business? I guess to get more into the details, what are you doing in this space? And can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah, so our development company, we build missing middle multifamily and secondary and tertiary markets around the Ottawa area. We'll soon be expanding to other places in Ontario. But we chose missing middle deliberately for those reasons that I just mentioned, that I'm very bullish on the trajectory of that asset class over the next decade. A second reason we chose it was for exit strategy. If we're going to develop a 30-unit apartment building, our ability to exit that is limited to a small number of buyers versus, if we build 10 sixplexes, we could condominiumize them. We could sell them off, one at a time. If we built, we have a fourplex that's, actually 4 row homes, we could sell individual ones to homeowners or investors. So our exit strategy is a lot more favorable. The other reason that we chose or were forced to choose that model, it further bolstered our thesis on that asset class, was the market. So we really started heavily investing in multifamily development about 5 or 6 years ago, and that's right at the beginning when the market started to get put on rocket fuel, essentially across North America, but particularly in Canada. And just for your info and your listeners' info, the average housing price in Canada is about $800,000. In the US, you're about half of that. Yeah. Even less than that. I think it's $360, the last one I saw from Redfin. So housing is quite expensive here, and it got a lot more expensive. But so all that to say, buying resale investment properties about 5 or 6 years ago, it was very difficult to pencil. And, we were talking before we started recording, but, buying, the price you buy at is just so critical. And it's such an underappreciated factor in your investment strategy that a lot of investors don't understand. But you make your money when you buy, and we didn't want to overpay for assets. So we decided to build from the ground up. We were going to create our own value. So, we have builders, we have a vertically integrated development company where we do everything soup to nuts. We acquire, we do rezoning, we do construction, we do the refinancing, and then we manage it long term. So we do everything. And in that sense, it's a bit more complicated for us. However, we are able to capitalize on a lot of efficiencies, especially, if we're able to build at cost, and that, we get that nice little refinance at the back end. And missing middle was just the perfect model for that type of strategy. So that's a long answer to a simple question, but hope that helps.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, when I hear that the average home price is $800,000, or so, I did not know. The first thing that I think of is that the price of wood is probably not too much more in Canada, if even different than America. So if you're building these homes, you got a lot more, I guess, room for profit if it costs the same to build, but you can sell it for more. Is that kind of make sense? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. The cost of materials are definitely more expensive here. And we ship most of our lumber to you guys. So it's actually, you would think that the price would be cheaper here, but it's not the case. It's like we've got a lot of oil here, but our gas prices are through the roof. So labor also tends to be quite a bit more expensive than in the US. And furthermore, our development costs and soft costs, there's so much more bureaucracy here in Canada than there is in the US. I mean, I was in Houston the other day, and it was like, no zoning. When you walk around that city, it's like the city doesn't have zoning, whereas we have a overabundance of restrictive zoning bylaws and regulations here in Canada. So the cost of construction is astronomical here, and that's what's contributing, as it is in the US, but here in Canada as well, to the affordability crisis, because it's so expensive to build that a lot of people are just not building. And you add on to that the supply strain and all that kind of stuff. It's so difficult to build. But just for your interest, like per door, we're paying a city about $20,000 to $25,000 just in fees. And that doesn't even get into all the soft costs associated with the planning and the surveys and the architects and the grading and soil testing and all that kind of stuff. You're when you're paying $50,000 per unit before you even put a shovel in the ground, it becomes very difficult to make that happen. But even with the prices of homes at record highs here in Canada, the development from the ground up model still made sense.
Awesome. Well, that's really illuminating. That's interesting. And it sounds like kind of a feedback loop where like everyone, the wages are high, or I guess it costs more to build the homes. So we got to sell them for more, and then people have to be able to afford them. So you have to pay them more so they can even afford these more expensive homes. I don't really know how you break a cycle like that. And I guess maybe the way that America does it is by having the American dream, attracting more and more demand and people moving in. So, it's kind of,
and there's less red tape, and there's a lot of states and municipalities wising up to the actual source of the problem, which is supply of homes. There's a lot of band-aid solutions that people have tried with, stress testing mortgages and limiting lending and foreign taxes and all this stuff. I mean, I'm not going to get into the merits of those, but really at the end of the day, you have to create more supply, and that's going to keep prices low. It's going to keep affordability up. It's going to help, put roofs over people's heads. And, California just passed SB9, and, on any R1 lot now, for most R1 lots, you're by right allowed up to 4, depending on the circumstance. And there's all the governments in Canada, provincially, are looking at exactly that, trying to encourage supply by upzoning and covering municipality development fees and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I think before we were recording, I'm very bullish on the next 5 years for investors. It's a good time to be developing. It's a good time to be investing. And yes, interest rates are going up, but everything else is working in the favor of trying to create more homes, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, and you hit on an interesting point, because I know California has definitely a problem with affordability and I guess definitely supply. And it sounds like, I guess they even are losing some of their population to some of the southern states that I guess with the work from home and the hybrid work shift. But I know that it sounds like if they're actually allowing R1 to now be multifamily or of like a 4 unit, that definitely could help the supply a lot. Where back in the day when they tried to do rent control, they actually ended up stifling the supply because everything else got more expensive outside of the little place that is the only part that was rent controlled. And so that's interesting that they it seems like it's making more sense.
Yeah, and I mean it's a long tail, right? It's going to take years for that to catch up, for the development to catch up with demand. But as you enable that supply, you are putting downward pressure on prices just by virtue of creating more products in the market. So it's, in my mind, it's a good thing, and it's going to take years for the supply to catch up with demand. But at least we're making these incremental changes now, as opposed to just burying our heads in the sand.
Awesome. Yeah. Sounds like it's going to be a fun time for real estate investors for sure. So another theme that you've mentioned in Briefcase, in your newsletter, is the tiny homes. And I kind of wanted you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I love writing about tiny homes. I think they're fantastic. I think they're a massive opportunity. I think, so I mean, like, going back to sort of the digitization of everything and disrupting the industry, the reality is that we need less space now. We don't need 5 bookshelves. We've got Audible, and Kindle. We don't need a CD tower. We don't need, 100 DVDs. So the reality is that, human beings, outside of the pandemic, where people wanted a little bit more space and a little bit more green space, there was actually a trend towards smaller housing units. But we've just seen this massive boom in tiny home development. It's expected to increase in, the industry as a whole is expected to increase by 3.5 billion by 2026. And it's going to help with affordability, because these tiny homes cost a fraction of the cost of a regular home, and they can help with homelessness. There's been a myriad of studies done around homelessness and mental health. And, if you it's amazing what will happen if you put a roof over someone's head, even if it's a tiny home or, a converted motel or something like that. So you're seeing a lot of municipalities, especially in California, speaking of California, converting tent cities that, aren't great to look at, aren't great to live at, aren't great for the neighborhood into, one in San Francisco is now a 70 unit tiny home community where there's services, and it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, and to not only look at it, but to live in it as well. And again, I speak a lot about light densification. Tiny homes are perfect. Like, you can put one in your backyard to supplement your income, or, your people are overpaying for houses right now and at record high interest rates. So they might need a tiny home in their backyard to Airbnb, or to, house one of their children while they're going to college. Or there's just so many great opportunities to use these tiny homes. And the data really shows that people are much more willing to consider tiny homes now. One of the studies that we referenced in our latest newsletter was it was something like 23% of all Americans said that they would definitely consider, or they would live in a tiny home. So that's a quarter of the population. And if you look at age groups, your age group, Ben, 18 to 34, I'm guessing, I'm not going to guess your age, but that number jumps to 34. So 34% of people age 18 to 34 said they would live in a tiny home or would definitely consider it. So there's a lot of, like, again, with missing middle multifamily, there's a lot of economic changes and, environmental changes. I haven't even talked about the environmental benefits of tiny homes. They use so much less energy. They're much cheaper to build, all that kind of stuff. So for all those reasons, and I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of others, I'm really bullish on tiny homes, and the market speaks for itself. It's growing astronomically. We're seeing tiny home developers and builders pop up all over the place, and we're seeing municipalities say, hey, you're going to be allowed to build tiny homes. You don't have to come to us to ask permission anymore, pay all these fees, or go through all these, site planning and paperwork and all that kind of stuff. So, again, another real estate trend that I think is on the up and up, and I think it's a great thing.
Awesome. How big is a tiny home?
If you look at definitions for, like, building code and things like that, it's 400 square feet roughly. But you have tiny home builders that are doing 100 square feet. I've seen some really, really nice tiny homes that are 800 square feet, and they're, 3 bedrooms, and they have like a rooftop patio. So it's so flexible in how you design. You're limited. The same thing with a house. You're limited only by your imagination.
Yeah, that's awesome. I gotta look up a picture, because I feel like I gotta see, the different possibilities and how that works. But that's pretty interesting. Definitely gotta check it out. And I know we touched on this a little bit also at the beginning of the episode. Want to circle back. Some people think that we are in a housing bubble, kind of like 2008, and I think a lot of people don't agree with that. But I kind of wanted to hear. There's definitely some sort of economic winds blowing, so I kind of wanted to hear what you thought about, whether it is a housing bubble or whether there will be precipitous, decrease in property values, or or what.
Yeah, again, I don't want to make definitive predictions, but we could very well be in a bubble, but a different bubble. We're definitely not in a housing bubble. If you look at household mortgage debt service as a percentage of the disposable income, it's actually much lower than it was during the Great Recession, and it's the lowest point it's been in a very long time, actually, in decades. I think where people get the bubble talk is from the rapid rise in prices, and now the fear of and reality of higher borrowing costs. So people, the thought is that people overpaid for a home and now their mortgages are going to go up. So it's sort of like a double whammy. But again, if you look at the pocketbook of the average homeowner, it's better than it ever was. So I don't think we're necessarily in a housing bubble territory, particularly because we have so many people who want homes and we just don't have enough homes to provide them. So it's like there's not that, like I mentioned before, that artificial demand there that's required to be able to call something a bubble. Now there's other sectors that are scary at the moment. Credit card debt, inflation is very scary. College debt. There's a lot of sectors that we can talk about bubbles, but definitely not in housing. And again, people use terms interchangeably. So like they'll say housing crash or housing bubble. I think we're definitely not in a time period where we're going to see 20% year over year increases for the next 5 years. Absolutely not. In fact, we might even see a decline, but we're definitely in a situation where we'll probably see a soft landing in the housing market over the next couple of years. And as you know, Ben, every real estate is a hyper local business. So some markets, as we enter into a recession and an anchor employer closes in that town, yeah, you might see a 20 or 30% drop in real estate prices. But nationally and across North America, I think we're in for a soft landing on the housing front, and I actually think that's a good thing. It's a more balanced market, as supply starts to catch up with demand, and demand starts to decrease as interest rates go up and borrowing costs go up. So I think it's a good thing.
I actually heard, it definitely, that's a lot of good things to think about. I actually heard this really interesting perspective that I hadn't heard before a couple of days ago, that this one economist predicts that with increases in mortgages, that people who have already locked in lower rates, like people who have already purchased homes, are not going to want to sell. There's going to be a lot less people willing to sell because they don't want to go find a new house where they have to pay a higher mortgage, where they're already locked into their 3%, and they don't want to go pay 5%. So that there actually might be an increase in housing prices because there will not be enough supply to meet the demand, because people are not going to want to leave their houses where they have the nice mortgage already. So I was like, wow, like seems like totally counterintuitive, but then think about it, it's a logical argument. So it's like, oh, it was pretty interesting.
Yep. No, whoever said that is absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's crazy times. Well, on that, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes.
All right. So if you could choose any superpower, what would you choose?
Invisibility.
Ooh, that's the first on the show. What's your rationale?
I have no idea. That's just the first thing that came to mind.
Awesome. That works. So what's your favorite book, or what's the one that's helped you the most?
I'm sure people mention this all the time, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that definitely changed the perspective. I don't necessarily agree with everything that Robert Kiyosaki says, but I think he did a great service to generations of people who have lacked in financial education in our school system by writing that book. So I definitely, that's my number one. Awesome.
And what motivates you to continue every day?
My family. I have 4 young daughters, all under the age of 11. So they love coming to properties with me and seeing the different businesses and helping out. So that really keeps me going.
Awesome. And what advice would you give to someone who wants to follow in your footsteps?
Be okay to fail. I think I talk to a lot of young investors now, and they're sort of stuck in analysis paralysis, and the market doesn't help with that. But they're afraid to take action. It sounds very simple, but I remember my first rental property purchase. It was the scariest thing I've ever done, and given the scale of things that are happening now, there was no reason for me to be scared at that time. But I think, taking action, number one, and just networking, nothing amazing happens in isolation. You got to surround yourself with like-minded people and partners and, groups and mentors and coaches and all that kind of stuff. So just get yourself out there and take action, even if it's just going up to an experienced investor and saying, hey, can I work for you for free for 3 months? Let me do X, Y, and Z for you, provide value. Just get out there, learn, and don't be afraid to get, the proverbial punch in the face every now and then by failing. Everyone fails.
Yeah. And I guess I heard this formula: pain plus reflection equals growth. And it's hard to, and yeah, so I guess failure is definitely could be a source of pain, but definitely can be an investment in creating a better you for all future problems that you face. So that's awesome. So since I put you on the spot, I want to give you a chance for revenge. Feel free to ask me any question you want to know about me.
Just trying to think here. So what, I'm intrigued now by the superpower question. What, if you could have any superpower, what would yours be?
It would definitely be super speed. I'm pretty into productivity. It'd be cool sometimes cut out my travel time, and I won't be late for meetings ever, and be able to not be two places at once, but that'd be cool, being two places at once, if that could be a superpower. But yeah, also just be cool to be the best hockey player.
Oh, you're speaking to a Canadian, so that's my language.
Yeah, awesome. I've been playing hockey since I was maybe 8, but when I moved down to New Orleans, they didn't have any ice rinks because they sold it. It's now like a food warehouse. So yeah, I only get to go on the ice when I'm back in Maryland.
Nice. That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think everyone's learned a lot, and there's a lot. I'm definitely going to be on Google for the next hour, following up on some of these awesome trends that we've chatted about. But if is there anywhere that the audience can find out more about you, maybe subscribe to the newsletter?
Yeah, absolutely. So go to briefcase.email. It's a free weekly newsletter. You can sign up. I write each issue. It comes from my email. So you can just sign up to the newsletter and respond to any email, and I'll see it, and happy to have a chat with anyone, anytime, about anything to do with real estate. I live and breathe this stuff, and I love it. And I love contributing and educating and all that kind of stuff. Same thing to what you're doing, Ben, here.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Definitely a lot of cool stuff to learn about. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Brad, and everyone keep making milestones.